Welcome back, children. Now we are going to discuss about the next infrastructure, that is power. I told you in this chapter we will be concentrating on three major infrastructure. One is energy, power and health. We finished with energy and next we are moving on to power. You know, power is an essential infrastructure which we need for the proper functioning of an economy, right? Power is essential for economic development. Now, huge investments is made on the development of power projects because without that, no functioning of economy can take place. Therefore, government is paying more attention to increase its investments in the power projects. Now, there are three main sources of electricity in India. They are, one is thermal power, next is hydroelectric power, and the third one is nuclear or atomic power. Now, thermal power, it is generated out of coal, oil and natural gas. So, thermal power is the main source of energy in our economy. As far as Indian economy is concerned, the thermal source of energy is the most important source of energy, source of power. Okay, so thermal power is generated out of coal, oil and natural gas, and it accounts for 67%. So thus you can understand what is the importance of thermal power. So thermal power is accounts for 67% of power in Indian economy, and it is made out of coal, oil and natural gas. Next is hydroelectric power. You know, it is a power which is generated from water, mainly from rivers or dams. We have big reservoirs, dams. Next is nuclear or atomic power. The power which is generated from uranium, thorium and plutonium is known as nuclear or atomic power. And they are highly economical and they are up-to-date source of power. So, they are highly economical and up-to-date source of power. So, three major sources of power is being used in India. They are thermal power, hydroelectric power, atomic or nuclear power. In this, thermal power accounts for the largest share, that is 67%. So, next we will move on to a pie diagram. You all are familiar with the pie diagram, which you have learned in class 11. Now, in pie diagram, the major sources of energy, the three main sources of power is explained. Okay, here in this pie diagram, the share of each sources of power is being given. I have told you thermal sources of power accounts for 67% and that is the highest, which is represented by this area. Okay, with the dot. Now, hydro, which is produced with the help of water, and it accounts for 13.6%, which is represented by an into mark. Okay, next comes the nuclear or atomic energy. This is the area and that is a very small share. You can find it here, and that is 2.10%. And the rest of all other renewable sources, that is being marked here, this particular area, and that accounts for 17.3%. So, more concentration has to be given by the government for the production of thermal sources of power because it accounts for the largest share. By the side, other sources of power also has to be developed with a proper technology. Okay, now we will move on to challenges in the power sector. There are so many challenges faced in the power sector. Now let us discuss it one by one. First point is inadequate electricity generation. What do you mean by that? The installed capacity to generate electricity is not sufficient to feed annual economic growth At present, India is able to add only 2 lakh megawatt a year. You know that economy is progressing. We aim for economic development. We aim for economic development. So, emergence of more and more industries are required. Day by day, population is also increasing, demand is increasing, and the demand has to be met with supply. More industries has to come up. They all need the use of power. Power is very important. Therefore, government has to pay utmost attention for the generation of power resources, isn't it? But what is a major problem that we are facing? Inadequate electricity generation. Whatever we have installed, the technology is being installed, the installed capacity to generate is not sufficient. Whatever we have installed, its capacity is less to generate. So, installed capacity to generate electricity is not sufficient to feed the annual economic growth. To feed the annual economic growth, that means number of industries are increasing day by day. Therefore, they all need the source of power. To feed them, the existing capacity is not sufficient. Therefore, government has to take measures to increase that. Next is underutilization of installed capacity. Whatever arrangements have been made, those are not utilized properly. Optimum utilization of installed capacity is not taking place. So, power plants are not run properly. Example for that, in India, PLF, what is meant by PLF? Plant load factor. Power plants, they are being installed, right? So, installed capacity is not properly utilized, and some of the plant load factor, they are not able to have an efficient productivity also. That is the problem. Now, here example, in India, PLF, the plant load factor is very poor and less attention is paid to it. What is this PLF, plant load factor? What is meant by this plant load factor? Plant load factor means the percentage of energy sent out by a power plant. Each power plant should have a capacity. If the capacity of the power plant is less, the amount of the energy which is being sent out by that power plant is less. If it is less, we have to correct it. So that shows the inefficiency of that power plant. It has to be removed and it has to be reinstalled. So, what is meant by PLF? PLF is the percentage of energy which is sent out by a power plant corresponding to the installed capacity. Every power plant should send out a particular amount of energy corresponding to the installed capacity. If that power plant is not giving the energy corresponding to the installed capacity, it has to be removed. So, initiation has to be taken to remove the inefficient PLF. Instead of that, the new one has to be installed which can give enough amount of energy. So, if that is not taken into consideration, the existing PLF will run with a less amount of energy which is driven out. So, that will again create a loss. Now, point number 3, poor performance of state electricity boards. So, state electricity boards have to be more vigilant in the production of power and in the usage of power. Let us see what are their poor performance. They incur loss of more than rupees 500 billion. Why? This is due to transmission and distribution loss. While they are transmitting the electricity, while they are distributing the electricity, some kind of loss is taking place. Then wrong pricing of electricity, then operational inefficiencies, the staff management has to be done properly, then wrong pricing. All these are the main reasons for the inefficient management. So, poor performance of state electricity boards. All these poor performance can create a lot of challenges in the power sector that has to be rectified. Now, wrong pricing has created the lot of pressure among the people, right? So, as a result, the consumption pattern also among the households, people has become more vigilant in the usage of electricity, because you know the pricing of electricity has gone up like anything. Therefore, some kind of public interest was also there with regard to the pricing policies, isn't it? Next is shortage of inputs. Thermal power plants, they are facing shortage of raw materials. I told you, thermal power plants account for 67% of power production. Now, in that, the raw materials are facing a shortage. Therefore, that has to be rectified, being the biggest source of power generation. That is what I told. The thermal power plant accounts for 67%. Therefore, any shortage of raw material there has to be properly rectified. Next is limited role of private entrepreneurs. Now we can find, especially in this area, in power generation, government is having a monopoly and government is leading in it. So it could be better to hand over some of the authority to the private sector so that it can run properly. Next is lack of public cooperation. People are also not cooperating properly. For example, due to high tariff and prolonged power cuts, I told you some kinds of strike and some kind of dissatisfaction was there among the people as the price of electricity has gone up. Therefore, that kind of lack of public cooperation has created lot of problems in the power sector, and even prolonged power cuts, that also has created severe problems. Now all these are the challenges which are faced by the power sector. Point number 1, inadequate electricity generation. Next is underutilization of installed capacity. That means whatever the power load factor is being installed, its capacity is not properly utilized, and some PLF are inefficient, poor performance of SCBs, state electricity boards, shortage of inputs, then limited role of private sector and lack of public cooperation are some of the major challenges faced by the power sector in India, and all these points have to be learnt properly. It is very important from the examination point of view. Now, after learning the challenges, you have to go through page 8.12, where the information is given in the form of a box. It is a case study of power distribution in Delhi, about the power management in Delhi. So you have to go through the case study which is given in textbook in page number 8.12, given in a box. It is a case study with regard to power management in Delhi. Next, we learned about the challenges faced by the power sector. Next is how to meet that crisis. What are the solutions to remove such challenges, to remove such problems? The first point is improvement in PLF. What is meant by PLF? The percentage of energy which is sent out by a power plant corresponding to the installed capacity is known as PLF. Therefore, what has to be done? PLF has to be improved. When PLF is improved, it helps in the better utilization of capacity of the plant. It has to be reinstalled. Otherwise, what will happen? The PLF, if it is not efficient, it will not be sending out the energy corresponding to the installed capacity. Next is control of transmission and distribution loss. Why this transmission and distribution loss is happening? Due to the inefficient management. Therefore, all the authorities of the state electricity board has to be vigilant in controlling the transmission and distribution loss. Only they can do it. Next is increase the productive capacity. Increase the productive capacity of power plants, as well as, for example, thermal power plant was facing lot of thermal power resources. They are facing lot of problem with lack of raw materials. Provide raw materials so that more power can be generated. So increase the productive capacity by any means. Encourage the role of private sectors. I told you only government is leading with the power energy, power resources. Private sectors also should be involved in the power sector. So situations can change. It can make a better result. Next is encourage the use of renewable resources. So use of renewable resources, energy is an additional supply of electricity. For example, biomass, you know what is it, isn't it? Energy from the animals and plants meets the energy needs in rural and remote areas, isn't it? So, biomass meet the energy in the rural and remote areas. So, that has to be promoted. So, renewable energy which can be used again and again, which can be renewed, that has to be promoted. Therefore, the challenge, we can overcome the challenges like that. Then comes the next, development of hydro potential. Only 21.14% of the potential has been developed so far. So, we have to develop that area too. So, all these can remove the problems in the power sector. Other measures are increase in public investment, encourage the people, better research and development efforts. What is meant by that? In order to, so many problems are faced in the power sector. In order to remove all these problems, what has to be done? What all necessary measures and steps have to be taken? A proper survey and the research work is required for removing the problems related to the power sector. So, that has to be encouraged by the electricity boards. Then comes technological innovation. Technological innovation is very important. That can make a great change for more power generation. So, lack of technology creates more challenges. So, that has to be rectified. So, all these are the measures to meet the crisis. So, measures, effective tools are improvement in PLF, control of transmission and distribution loss, increase the productive capacity, give more raw materials to the thermal power to generate thermal power. Next is encourage the role of private sector, encourage the use of renewable resources. If it is non-renewable, they are easily exhaustible. Okay, then comes the next one, development of hydro potential. So, this has to be stressed. Encourage the use of renewable. If it is non-renewable, it takes long time. It is exhausted while it is used. So, but if it is renewable, it can be used again and again. So, encourage the use of renewable resources. Then development of hydro potential, and finally through research and developmental efforts, lot of improvements can be made in the power sector. So, all these are the measures to meet the power crisis. That's all. Thank you.